And welcome to the January 12th, 2023 meeting of the Indian River County Planning and Zoning Commission. We'll call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Counselor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. As it's the first meeting of this committee in the new year, we have to elect a chair and a vice chair. I would thereby open the floor for nominations for chairman.
I would like to nominate Dr. Day to serve another term as chair.
A nomination and a second. If there are no other nominations, I'll close the floor for nominations and proceed to vote on Dr. Day as being the chair. All those in favor of saying in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. I would open the floor for nominations for vice chair.
I would nominate Mr. Brugnano, especially since he's not here to decline.
Perfect.
Mr. Brugnano has been nominated for vice chair. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second. Any other nominations? I'm closing the floor for nominations. All those in favor of Mr. Brugnano for vice chair signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Carries unanimously. Congratulations in absentia of Mr. Brugnano. Mr. Chair, congratulations. I turn the meeting back over to you.
Thank you. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
No, sir.
None. We have a set of minutes from December 8th, 2022 for approval.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Passes. There are two agenda items tonight. One is a public hearing, and the other is a quasi-judicial hearing. So we'll start with the quasi-judicial, and that is a Bridge Marketplace. And this is a request for a major site plan approval to construct a 45,084 square foot shopping center to be known as Bridge Marketplace. Stiles Corporation is the applicant. Skokie, Brittle, and Stoddard LLC the agent. This is located at the southwest corner of State Road 510 and Harbor Isle Way. The zoning is CG, General Commercial, and CL, Limited Commercial. The land use designation is CI, Commercial Industrial. Any declaration of ex parte communications regarding this? None. Anyone who wants to speak on this, please get sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
And staff presentation, please.
Let's see here. Oops. I'm sorry. Sorry about that upstairs. Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Ryan Sweeney, Chief of Current Development. I do want to note that this project has been shepherded through by Brandon Cragen, Senior Planner, but he's out on a much-deserved vacation this week, so I'll be presenting it for him. Tonight's request is for the Bridge Marketplace Shopping Center major site plan approval. The project site is located at the southwest corner of State Road 510 and Harbor Isle Way. We do specifically call it out as State Road 510, although most folks refer to it as County Road 510. The segment between US 1 and A1A is actually under DOT jurisdiction. And here's a depiction of the location of the site. From this point forward, nothing's quite north, is not up or right, but it's towards sort of the angle. So this is the best way to depict it on the layout, but bear with us. So 510 is to the top of the screen, if you will, and Harbor Isle Way is to the right. This is the aerial depicting the existing conditions of the site with the site plan overlaid on top of it. And here is the site plan with the general layout, including the shopping center, supermarket with retail, the drive-through bank, parking field, and then future out parcel that's not part of this approval that will require separate approval in the future, most likely at the staff level.
Wasn't there a fast food restaurant mentioned?
That's mentioned, but it could change depending on what ultimately market conditions Drive. The traffic circulation plan includes 2 right-in, right-out driveway connections to State Road 510. The main or middle driveway connection will be served by a right turn lane. There's a sort of a primary driveway through the site, north-south if you want to call it that, and then a sort of an east-west driveway that connects to Harbor Isle Way. There is a full access driveway connection to Harbor Isle Way. 2 driveway connections to Mayflower, which is a perimeter ring road that rings around Harbor Isle, which is the residential portion of this project. And that covers all of the driveways. There's a number of off-site traffic improvements that are required for this project. The right turn lane at this driveway, right turn lane and U-turn lane, raised median at the intersection of Harbor Isle Way and State Road 510, signalization of the intersection of Harbor Isle Way and State Road 510, right turn lane to serve this driveway connection on Harbor Isle Way, and then not on this screen, maybe, not on, it's way over on the US 1 connection to Harbor Isle, the residential, there's a right turn lane that's required on US 1. That's also a requirement of the Harbor Isle development, so it will probably be provided through with the residential development, but if for some reason the residential stalls, that's also a required improvement for this project. And again, the Mayflower is a ring road that you can come in, the public can come in through the driveway connection on US 1 and loop around and get into this shopping center, and then they can also come back out of Harbor Isle Way and vice versa. And that's all open to the public, no gating. Stormwater, the stormwater ponds are part of the master system for what was originally approved as one project, commercial and residential, and so the ponds are located on the residential portion. Of course, they will need their stormwater pipes and structures and conveyance on the site, which will still require a stormwater permit, but the ponds themselves are in the residential portion of the project. The landscape plan requires landscape buffers along State Road 510, Harbor Isle Way, Mayflower, as well as a type B buffer with a 8-foot block wall opaque feature along the residential portion to the effectively south. Required improvements include all of the off-site traffic improvements that I ran through, but are also listed in more detail in the staff report. External sidewalks, primarily a redo of the existing external sidewalks along State Road 510, as well as Harbor Isle Way and Mayflower, and then internal sidewalks and pedestrian system. And staff's recommendation is that the Planning and Zoning Commission grant major site plan approval with conditions stated in the staff report related to tree mitigation, off-site traffic improvements, internal and external sidewalk improvements, and the landscape buffer and improvements. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Commissioner questions? Go ahead.
I have a couple.
Sure.
Just anecdotally, I traveled 510 yesterday on my way to an inland district meeting, and 3 out of our 5 commissioners got hung up on 510. So I knew that I was headed this way, and I do have several questions. I know that DOT has jurisdiction on this road. The first question I have is, how many trips were identified in the traffic study? Do you know?
The traffic consultant is here, and he'll be able to hopefully give you that number. I can probably find it as well, but.
Well, I can wait on it.
Yeah, okay, yeah, we'll defer that to the consultant.
And then, just a general question, is there ever a time that the county can exceed the DOT requirements in a project?
Let me see. By exceed, you mean it require more than what, if it's county right away? Well, yeah, so, in a PD, yes. In a conventional subdivision or a permitted use like this, I don't believe we could require anything over and above what the DOT would require unless it's for concurrency purposes.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm not a traffic expert. It looks like you all have tackled the traffic problem as best you can. So I'll just let it be, but I am a little concerned about it.
Sure.
510 is really a mess.
Yeah, for what it's worth, yeah, so County Road 510, moving west to east, we're currently in PD&E from where it drops down from 512 to all the way to 58th, and then phase 2 is from 58th to US 1, and then separately, DOT is launching a kickoff for the Wabasso Bridge, which includes a segment from US 1 to A1A. So DOT is certainly working on that component of it. I do think,
You say they're kicking off the,
I don't know the public, there is a public workshop. I wish I should have had the date. I meant to ask the MPO. We can forward it to you all, but there is just the very beginnings of the workshop to talk about options for the bridge.
okay.
The other thing I will mention, just as a general, planning, not to get too into traffic, is the multiple points of access and the multiple ways to go from A to B certainly allows the traffic to distribute. And, if you get caught in trying to go northbound to make the left, whereas you could go out to State Road 510 and go through, or vice versa, eventually, traffic folks try to figure out their patterns based on their preferences.
That's all I have.
Any other on this side? Go ahead.
When we're talking about the timeline of the construction that's happening on 510 between US 1 and out to 58th and what's happening with the bridge, how does that coincide with the timeline for this project?
So the project's improvements will be required commensurate with this project prior to CO. So they're required to, all the bullet point list, I believe it's 7 or 8 improvements. They have to build those improvements for this project to serve this project prior to CO. The larger DOT projects are, probably years out. And again, they're moving west to east, so this would be the third phase of that project.
Just to give the members a little bit of an idea what's going on, they're acquiring the necessary right-of-way for the first phase of the project. That's going to be from 512 down to past the high school on 510. That's phase 1. Then they're going to split it into several phases, maybe as many as 4 or 5, before they start to get closer to US 1.
And does that include the roundabout?
That will include the roundabout, yes.
Anything else on this side? Anything on this side?
Can you blow up the picture of, I guess, what you're calling Mayflower and how that ties into US 1?
Fortunately, I realize now I probably should have had that graphic. I don't, but I maybe, if you give me a minute or two, I don't think I have a graphic that shows it. I could probably find something.
Well, I mean, it looks right now, there's like a little jog, but that's no longer gonna be, it'll be rounded somewhat.
Say it again?
It looks like there's a little jog right there at the entrance to the road to the residential down on the southwest corner at this point in time. And what I'm looking at appears to be somewhat different than that. It's kind of hard to tell, but that's my main concern in this whole situation. I understand there's going to be a light at Harbor Isle and 510. How far away is that light from 510 and US 1?
I'll defer to Brian as well. It definitely meets the signal separation. That's, if you have any more questions for staff, then we'll open it up to the applicant folks.
I have one
Well,
more.
let me, if I can continue, just from that. And you mentioned that there's an 8-foot wall buffer between the back of the grocery store, whatever it may be. Is there any landscaping of any sort on that?
Oh, yeah,
Or is it
yeah.
just a wall?
Absolutely. No, it's a full type B landscape buffer as well as the wall.
On the east side and west side, or just the?
Can you see my cursor here?
Yes.
This entire run has the green overlays the symbols, but there's trees, there's understory, large canopies, standard canopy, understory, and shrubs. Typically, we put the either wall in the middle, or we put all the landscape on the outside of the wall. But it's a sizable buffer.
Okay, but again, what's on the west side of that wall?
Nothing's on the backside. The shopping center's on the backside of the wall. We soften it by putting the landscape generally on the front side.
The front side being which
That's
side?
the side that faces the residential.
Okay, so that answers that question as well, but the access points, because I mean, there is a concern as to how much traffic is gonna be dumped onto US one going by that residential, which I know is a dirt road now, but it eventually will be not. So that's concerns, but I'm sure it'll be addressed.
All right.
That it, Chip?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mark?
My question had to do with, you mentioned tree mitigation, and I'm not very good at reading landscape plans. I see a few trees over on the left-hand side of the screen, but it kind of looks like because of the buildings and the parking, it's pretty much going to be clear cut, so.
It's by and large, that's already cleared. Yeah, the majority of the existing vegetation is along this property line. Again, I don't know if you can see my cursor, and they're gonna do what they can to preserve in place for two reasons. One, to avoid having to pay or mitigate, and two, because they can count that towards their buffer. But it,
Don't we require, even though it is clear cut or has been clear cut for many, many years, don't we ever require planting substantial trees in other areas?
well, we have a pretty substantial landscape code to begin with, but for mitigation, that would be for trees that are being removed now.
Right, but you don't have to have a certain number of trees in the landscape?
Absolutely, you do. Yeah. There's
Okay.
probably 7 or 8 different categories that you have to set.
Where are those? Are there any in the big parking lot to the right?
Yes, all of these symbols, and again, we overlaid it with our labels, but all of these symbols are trees, and there's quite a bit of landscaping throughout the parking lot and the building, and
Is this, I guess what I'm getting at, is this one of those things where they just pay into a fund and
No,
have all the trees that?
no, they have to plant, correct. So I think you're mixing two different things. Our landscape requirements need to be met regardless. Mitigation, you have the option of doing 3 things. The most preferred is to preserve and place them. It's not really a mitigation strategy, you just don't have to mitigate if you keep it in place. Planting, so you can plant new trees to offset trees that you're removing. And the third and least viable option, or least preferred option, is paying into the fee. And we only go to that option as a third option.
I was just wondering if there's gonna be a lot of that on this project, or?
There won't be a ton of mitigation. Again, most of the cleared, or most of the existing trees are sort of in the preserved area.
Right, so even though it's clear, we're only mitigating trees that are being removed.
Correct, that meet the requirements.
Okay,
You good?
yes.
All right, we'll go ahead and open up for public comment.
Joe Biddle, Schulke, Biddle and Stoddard, the engineer for the project. Brian's going to jump up with the traffic because I couldn't answer those questions either. I just want to address the landscape buffer along the west side is actually only required to be a 25-foot buffer with a 6-foot opaque feature. We actually have a 1 to 2 foot berm and then an 8-foot wall that'll be centered. So there'll be landscape on both sides. So it'll help our site and the residents. The other landscaping, there are, I don't know if Ryan wants to blow it up, but there are pockets of open spaces where we tried to save some of the bigger oaks. Like you said, everything to the east has already been cut down, and we're planting per code. All the islands will have landscaping, foundation plantings, and around the perimeter. So I think just to let you know, we've got a tentative DOT approval. We had to go through them for a couple months. The light actually does not meet their code. We had to get a variance, which we all fought for it. Obviously, it's a great idea. We've all seen the traffic on there, so I think the light will help the situation. But I'll let Brian jump up unless anyone has any other questions about the engineering. If you guys want to talk about traffic counts.
No, I just have one question, Joda. If I go to the supermarket, to the grocery store, and then I want to go to the bank, how do I get from the one parking lot to the other?
Well, the issue with that, originally we had a driving aisle to the north end that connected both, but we were going to be stuck with a median, and it didn't meet 100-foot driveway setbacks for the first turning movement. So we just shut that down. So you'll go through the site from the north to the south, and then you just take a right and come around the backside into the bank if you're coming from the east.
So I'm going to have to leave the development.
No, you go on Mayflower.
Yeah, it's,
I
it's,
go on Mayflower, the
Correct.
back way.
Yeah,
but you know, the vast majority of people coming from the east, we anticipate will turn left at the light anyway, so.
right.
That's the original Bristol Bay. I've worked on this project since 2005. So, you know, it was all supposed to flow together. You know, it was kind of a mixed use. So that roadway from US 1, Mayflower, all that is actually just for access. There's no residential component on that road.
Okay, thank you.
What are those building outlines just outside of this complex there?
Those are that's the residence.
Residential area.
Right.
Some of it's zone commercial, some of it's residential.
There's some houses and some detached garage. That's why there's a substantial
They're
buffer.
outside the project then?
Correct.
I didn't violate the ex parte communications by checking that out.
No, it's just, it's an existing older subdivision. That's the reason for the substantial buffer along that particular.
And back in '05, the DOT actually had plans to widen they've already changed the classification of 510. It's supposed to be 4 lanes from the bridge all the way to US 1. Some reason the project died. You know, I guess everything crashed, but they've already had plans for years, and I think they're
So-
reopening it back up.
So you're saying that looking at the bridge is not going to get to a bigger bridge?
I won't even suggest what they get more money than I do, so I assume it would be 4 lanes, but
Yeah.
I just don't know. So, all right, I'll let Brian talk numbers, traffic numbers.
Thanks, Jody. Brian Good, Kimley Horn and Associates. Thank you very much for your questions this evening. I tried to write them down. Commissioner Mitchell asked about the trips. So the project, as currently presented, is identified in the AM peak hour to have 240 trips, and that's inbound and exbound from the community, from the development rather. And in the PM peak hour, it's projected to have 466. So 200 and some odd entering, 200 and some odd exiting during the peak hour of activity. You are right, the US 1 510 intersection is not well operating. It's not been well operating for years. As some of the conversation this evening has touched on, that intersection has bounced back and forth between the county and DOT over the years. At one time, DOT had it back prior to 2006 with a PD&E study. The county took it over, had plans for improving and expanding the intersection. We had a little economic hiccup back in 2009, 2010. Those went on the shelves, and best as I understand it, it was discussed this evening. It's back in the Department of Transportation's capital improvement schedule to expand that intersection. I will say with the planned improvements, which was originally contemplated back by the county, the intersection does operate. So it really is just in need of the physical improvements that are being planned for that intersection. There was a question regarding spacing. The intersection, the proposed light at, what did I write that down? Harbor Isle Way, right? Yep. It's approximately 2,000 feet east of 510. As Jody made mention, DOT likes half-mile spacing. That's based upon the classification. We did have to get a variance. We went before DOT, and they did grant the variance for the signal at the intersection. And I believe that was all the questions that I wrote down. If I missed any, I apologize if you... No? All right. Thank you.
And I'm not sure who's appropriate, but again, one of the concerns is that road that comes off the back side, the south side, and goes to US 1, and what that's going to look like. I mean, I can see what it looks like right next to the project, but I mean, what is going to happen there?
Mayflower. I know that it's an internal service road providing connectivity between the residential and the commercial. I understand it just to be a 2-lane road.
It's a 2-lane loop road. I might be able to,
Are we talking about what goes all the way out to US 1? Yeah, this is, it's the same 2-lane road. They did a separate road instead of, what we used to do for these PDs and mixed-use projects was the county was always trying to push interconnection and a center road that everyone can use. I don't know if we can pull up Google Maps.
I was going.
But it's, You know, it's just a spine road that goes from US 1 all the way up to 510. That's the main entrance for their residential subdivision. I believe it has a right turn lane into the site and a southbound left turn lane on US 1 into it, from what I remember, but again, it's been years.
Yeah, I just wanted them to stay on the broadcast, so I'm not going into the computer here. Give me 1 second. I should be able to pull up the Harbor Isle. If I can find, PCC.
And the question's coming from the standpoint of people coming out of the parking area there. They come to the light, and they've got a line to turn left out of there to head west, or do they just go to US 1 and then go north from there? I mean, the concern is dumping more traffic there than would make sense.
Sorry about that. I realized, so this is the exhibit for Harbor Isle that you all reviewed and approved last year. So again, north is sort of to the right, if you will. This is State Road 510. And what happens is Harbor Isle Way, you come in and you can turn right onto Mayflower. Mayflower loops around.
Okay, so that's not where the residential outside of the development is the roads that I'm concerned with then?
Correct.
That's all just self-contained then?
Correct. Yeah, so the gates to go into Harbor Isle are after the intersection of Harbor Isle Way and Mayflower, and then same thing on US 1. When the public comes in, they immediately turn left to loop around, and the gates are beyond that. So
If you want to bring up my site plan sheet again.
your site plan sheet.
Yeah. You can see there's a ditch that runs between the two, actually the one with the aerial, sorry.
Yeah, that's better.
You can see that's an existing dirt road, that's all the roadway back there. And that's gonna remain, and then we have the paved road next to it, and there's actually a ditch between them.
Okay.
So, and then that connection point has always been the planned connection point for that area to tie into Mayflower, which gives them access to 510, or they can go south to US 1. The original plans when they did 510 US 1 construction, obviously the Wabasco Tackle sadly has not been open for quite some time. I used to go there. But, you know, the intent was that was going to be removed, so that access point, I believe, because it didn't meet any DOT code requirements, is going to be removed, and this would be the new access point.
Is the Mayflower term a reference to how long this project's been around?
Yes.
I know I've seen tractors out there, so hopefully it's sooner than later.
They're moving along, yeah, that's okay. All right, well, that means then, so they're not gonna tear down the bait and tackle shop?
And not until they do the improvements. I thought, and
If I can still get in there and get all the lead weights that are hanging up out
I
of
think they're in there,
that-
because
they're getting
we
expensive.
had originally thought that the county bought it, because that was part of the original, but I looked it up and they still own it. So I was floored, we were floored, so, but
Okay.
the county does not own that corner yet, so that'll be negotiations at a later date.
All right, but the residential people there on the dirt road then are
Yes.
gonna be pretty well protected?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm having a little trouble, there's a reference to a grocery store and a little strip center thing there. What's the magnitude of this? Is there a comparable center that would help me with this?
It starts with a P. Ends with
Just
an X.
up the road at Barber?
It's a new Publix.
Yeah.
It's just, it's one of their smaller prototypes, though, to fit in this area. It's not one of the massive ones.
Okay, so would it be like the Barber Street
Yeah,
Publix complex?
probably, yeah.
Roughly.
But we've been wondering whether the Publix at Ryanwood would close if they ever build the one out at 82nd. And I don't know, will this take the place of one, or?
That serves
Additional.
Greater Sebastian, that's,
Right.
you know, this is what,
We'll serve that.
I mean, I think we've all been
Just
around
for the
long enough. We've tried to
annexation.
put a Publix on the island for years. It's been
Yeah,
about as close as you can get, so.
yeah, the moorings people put an
That's-
end to that.
Any other comments from your group?
Anybody questions?
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Call for a motion.
Motion to approve with staff recommendations?
Motion to approve, second. What's that?
We haven't closed the hearing.
Oh, yeah, well,
He's got public comment.
yeah, come on.
My name's Bill Miller, and I own property up there. I've talked to Brian today, and you all do such a great job of speaking. Could you speak on my concerns?
Well, yeah, Mr. Miller owns most of these properties here, and just wants to be sure that the connection is made whole. The connection requirement is actually a requirement of Harbor Isle, of the residential portion, and that's been approved, it's under construction. There's some legal documents easements that need to occur. It's hard to make heads or tails of it, but if you look, the connection to Mayflower is to, again, to Harbor Isle. The heavy dark line, which is the perimeter of Bridge Market, is not a part of that. So while it is related and it was originally approved, Bristol Bay was originally approved as a single combined project, and the developer at the time issued Mr. Miller a letter assuring he would have access, but they've since split off, and the requirement is tied to Harbor Isle. And we are keenly aware of his concerns and make sure that they'll follow through. Anything else?
Yeah, 85th Street is the dirt road that is to the south of our property.
Correct.
46th was a road that was abandoned from there out to 510. That was the main in and out for our neighborhood.
Right, if you guys can see my, not to interrupt Mr. Miller, but 46 used to run through and sort of follow the same, if you,
Went out to 510.
correct. And now you'll take Mayflower instead.
Right, that's why it's important that that's a safe intersection right there, where we tie into that Mayflower. And 46th was abandoned. The southern 140 feet of it was not abandoned. And I'm curious what's happened to that property. I'm assuming it's county-owned. Is that part of piping?
It's just gonna be a ditch still. There's a actual ditch that runs through the property, and kind of see the outline of it on the aerial. We're gonna fill in the ditch and put a new pipe, but the area next to your property is still gonna be the ditch. So,
Can he apply for abandonment?
everything's been abandoned for,
What's up for this last, this last little
it's
segment?
not our property, it's county right away.
You could apply to have that segment abandoned once everything's closed out.
Yeah. And there was some discussion about some trees. There are some heavy trees just on the north side of our property. They probably lie in their projects.
You can see right here,
Footpath.
all this area is where we're keeping the trees in those open space areas right there, those two.
Well, you've got a tree up behind 46 or 4700 that's probably 5 feet from the property line.
Yeah.
So it's probably a 60-inch tree. So I don't know where you're, I don't know if you can, but the statement that, well, we're going to try to get around the big trees. We've all seen the big trees disappear if you live here for 10 years. And I don't want to see them try. I want to see them do it. If there's a tree there and it's 10 feet inside the line, go around it, If we don't see the trunk anymore, that's one thing. Put the fence on the other side, but don't knock the trees down, I don't understand all the mitigation stuff, but I remember when it happened over off of Jungle Trail, and it was smitten is what they ended up paying to knock all the oaks out. And
So for that tree, there are the three options that you outlined at the beginning of this session, right?
Right, so preserve in place, if it's engineering wise, if it's 3.5 feet below where the parking lot's gonna be, then it's not gonna survive anyways. Replant, so at 60 inches, you have to replant 2 to 1, you have to replant 120 inches of new trees. And then pay is $100 per inch, so that's a $6,000 tree by itself. That's why I said it will behoove them to try to preserve as much as they can for 2 reasons. One, you don't have to mitigate for it, and 2, that tree also counts as credit, a lot of credit. It counts as like 4 or 5 trees as new trees. So everything in our code is geared towards preserving for those reasons. One, financially you don't have to account for it, whether it's planting new trees or paying fees, and 2, you get to utilize it in your buffer requirements.
Well, it's $6,000, that's kind of the pittance he was talking about.
That's just one tree.
Well, isn't that the big tree? Isn't that the
There's,
60-inch tree?
any tree that's over 12 inches that's of a certain species has to be mitigated. It can, I mean, we have projects that are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees, so we try not to promote that option.
And right now, the fate of the tree that Mr. Miller is concerned about
I'm
is
not-
unknown.
Yeah, Brandon would know, I'm sure, but we'll double check on our landscape plan.
So maybe you can exchange contact
I've got-
information
yeah,
and
I-
keep Mr. Miller in the loop?
And is that, could you show us where that tree is?
I can't, I don't have that level of detail.
Is it
There's
inside
one,
or outside the project?
Bill, you wanna, I don't know that this is, yeah, this is kind of the technical level of area that staff handles.
That's why I asked if it was inside or outside this project, what we're talking about tonight.
The, can you put your cursor on 4620? Go up the other way.
This one,
Yeah, one more.
this one.
Okay. In outline, keep your cursor on that house.
Okay,
And to the right of it, there's an outline of a garage.
yep, here.
That's on our property. So the tree that I'm speaking about, you can't see that garage because it's that big.
Oh, understood.
So
yeah,
it's in that area. But if you come back down the line, there's several trees. And
Great.
the reason they're just on that edge is years ago, this was all cleared. And when you started your project, I think they transplanted a lot of the trees that were out in the grove. And that came around, they were gonna use those, you know, to grow them up big. But that's why there's not any big trees out.
Yeah, we're keeping as many trees as we can, but this isn't a 6-foot berm, a 3-foot berm, 3-foot hedge. We're not barreling through there. This is an 8-foot wall with, 1 or 2 foot berm, so we're gonna conserve all the trees we can in this area. I've already mathematically done everything on the plans, but I assure you, there's gonna be a lot of trees left in there. And obviously, we're not gonna just cut it down, just to cut it
Yeah,
down.
no, I think that's great. And they talked about an easement, Swanson,
Yeah, I know you brought that up a couple times, but
yeah,
when old Jerry Swanson, the old Bristol Bay project, we were trying to get that built, and the subdivision obviously failed. So we were going to give you access through our site because this road was not completed. But now that this road is going to be completed, that's why the easement was
well,
never
the letter's
recorded.
pretty specific. It talks about this area, 4620, in that area going north.
Well, I know, but
And
it was never recorded.
that was done because of 46 that got recorded. And my comments in the beginning were, well, that was old, we don't have to do that anymore, that's all. Well, if it's old, open 46 back up, and we'll be happy again. But that's already in ink, The reason our easement wasn't put in ink, they didn't know what they were gonna do over there. They didn't know where it would make sense to have an easement, drive through a parking lot and get back up to 510. And the county's promised me since '06, don't worry about it. You don't have to worry about it until a site plan comes. There was never any, well, if it changes hands, you're done. It was wait for a site plan, wait for a site plan. So here it is, 2023, and here's a site plan, and it's old news. It doesn't work anymore. And that disturbs me.
I'm interested as far as current, in the future form, you're gonna go on to 80, whatever it is, and then hit Mayflower and go out to 510 that way. Where before you used to be able to cut right through the site, correct?
Yes,
Okay, now the letter that you're talking about that talked about an easement, where is that easement supposedly gonna be located and what would it do for you?
it would be a direct access from the northern part of our property through their project out to 510.
It went through the old Bristol Bay commercial site plan parking lot is all it did. But there's two different things. One is the main reason that easement was even talked about was because Wabasso Tackle was getting demolished. US 1, that driveway access, which I don't know which way you come in now, I assume it's there, or you come in from one of the roads to the south, but they're still there. You still have all the access points you've had for the past 15 years. So that's why the easement that you're discussing, that was brought up when we did the original Bristol Bay, was because Wabasso Tackle and that access point that, I don't know if that's the one you use or not, was supposed to be removed with the DOT improvements. So you really only had no access because this road around Bristol Bay was not constructed, so we were gonna allow you to go through our site. That's the only reason that easement was brought up, but you still have the access to Wabasso Tackle. The subdivision should be completed shortly, so you have the main access, which has always been the county's proposed access for this area, which is a safer condition for all involved. So that's the reason why the easement's gone. That's why the 46th Avenue was abandoned and.
Right. Well, some of the conversations were, this isn't always gonna be residential. It may get developed into some apartments, and it would allow people to get out to 510. If there were fast food restaurants, businesses, they could walk over and get a cup of coffee. And I agree, that was the old plan. I think they had a coffee house or something in the commercial node. But, I've got a letter that I've been banking on it, but I've been waiting for the right time, and now everything's changed. There doesn't need an easement, and this is gonna get closed, and I just think it's rotten. And I mentioned to the county personnel, I shouldn't have to go out and hire a lawyer again. I think that's why I got the easement to begin with, because I had a lawyer with me, and he understood our property was on the corner of 46th that went out to 510. Now, it's not on the corner anymore. So there was a damage there. And anyway, I don't want to get in the way of a project, but I think the county,
If I could clarify, there is a publicly dedicated easement of record already in place from US 1 around Mayflower out to State Road 510. That's already of record. We're actually going to be coming to the board to abandon and replace it because it's being slightly shifted with the Harbor Isle project. It's dedicated to the public. Anybody can use it. This subdivision, there's a driveway. That's what I was trying to show everyone on this site plan slideshow. And if I can remember that's not what I was doing. Maybe it's kind of hard to make out, but there's a T intersection that connects to 85th. Is it 84th?
85th.
85th and Mayflower, and everybody can utilize it. If you read the letter very, I guess, what's the term? I'm sorry. Literally, it says north, but the reality is you're going east and out. Everybody from the subdivision that Mr. Miller owns in, as well as the other property owners, can go through the property, as well as everybody from the public. The literal interpretation of north is the only difference, but you can get from your subdivision out to State Road 510 to a signalized intersection, and vice versa to US 1.
You're correct.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay.
But it wasn't, this easement off our property wasn't for the whole neighborhood. It was for our property. And whatever future use we had, people could walk somewhere.
Right.
And I agree with you. They can get out and walk on Mayflower as well, but
Yeah, and that was the other point I wanted to drive home, is that the sidewalk that loops along Mayflower, it dead ends for Bridge Market, but it picks up so yeah, absolutely. There's a sidewalk connection that'll allow folks to walk to whatever might be in the shopping center.
now you mentioned today there was a better detail on that intersection there.
That is on the Harbor Isle plans.
So it sounds like the issue has been solved.
That's my opinion, yes.
Yeah.
And as long as we hold to like I said, the only issue, and Bill, you're aware of this, is we are going to be taking the existing easement alignment to the board to abandon and immediately record a revised easement because the alignment did change slightly. But we're not abolishing it, we're just making it match the plans.
Okay, any other questions or any other comments from the public? So I will back it up and close the public comment section. We do have a motion and a second.
It was Beth and Jordan?
Yes. And so can we move ahead with that?
You may.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Yep, thank you. The second agenda item tonight is a public hearing. And it is inclusion of low-impact design into the site plan submittal process. And we have nothing in our packet that deals with this. I'm assuming that you're going to go ahead and let us know what you're talking about?
Sure, Mr. Chair, staff started sort of working on this initiative and advertised before the holidays. We've not, unfortunately, kind of didn't finish making our final changes. So it had already been advertised for a public hearing. What we're requesting tonight is not to open and continue to a date because we're not 100% sure how much more tinkering staff's going to do. So what we'd rather do is, I guess, open and close. We'll come back entirely and re-advertise entirely. So this public,
We can just leave this right where it is?
correct.
Yeah, you're fine.
All right?
And we will completely re-advertise and come back at a later date with much more background than 2 sentences.
That sounds good to me. That sounds good to me. Are there commissioner matters? And Mark, if you have anything on your mind, this is where you tell us.
Yes, I know.
Any commissioner matters? Good. Any planning matters?
The only thing I will say is unfortunately, it does look like we are also angling for having the second meeting in January. Bridge Market actually snuck on because we thought we were going to have the public hearing, and they, of course, wanted to stay. They didn't want to be pushed. So we have some other projects that are likely going to be on the 26th.
26th?
Yes.
Okay.
At 6 p.m. Don't forget.
All right. Any idea about February at this point, or should we just?
Not yet.
All right, very good. Any attorney matters?
No, sir.
Excellent. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. I hope you feel better.
You too. You too.
Everybody. It's gonna be a better year.
Can't be a whole lot worse.
That's what I said, that argument last night.
Yeah.
Easements and access to the
Yeah, good to see you. So you gotta go out there anyway.
Yeah, I mean,